What I say to the federal government, that's not of your business. We decide at the National Assembly, the Quebecers are clear, and this is not a matter of federal government. So it's not of their business, and they should, on that subject of laïcité and on the subject of immigration, listen the Quebecers. That's a matter of respect.
Okay, so Tom, let me get your take on this. I thought that a bit of a shot across the bow with no uncertain terms telling the feds to butt out. What do you think?
I think it's shameful, and it's the second time this week we had a senior minister in the CAQ government showing a total lack of respect for the basic rules in a democratic society. So the courts exist to interpret and apply the law, and when you disagree with a law that the National Assembly has adopted, you can challenge it, which is what they've done. There was a recent ruling by the Quebec Court of Appeal that covered several distinct topics, one of which has a direct effect on minority language rights. So it is 100% federal interest to be involved in these, the same way back in the day the federal government got involved in the big legal case that was the Quebec Clause, Bill 101, versus the Canada Clause, access under Section 23 of the Canadian Charter of Rights. But what's the most disturbing, Aaron, in what we just heard, is a senior minister saying, you have no legitimate right to defend the Constitution, which is unbelievable. Now, Simon Jolin-Barrette, let's just, the English expression is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. My preferred version is the Quebecois version, which is not the most defrosted Pogo in the pack. I mean, this guy, he just misses big stuff. But we had Jean-François Roberge 2 days ago doing something almost identical. He's in Parliamentary Commission in Quebec City. La Ligue des Droits, so the League for Human Rights in Quebec, a very respected organization, is appearing saying, do not renew the notwithstanding clause on Bill 21. And he refuses to talk to them. He says, because they have a position that's different from his. He says, that's an insult to the state of Quebec. So I don't know. I never would have thought that we would have sunk so low with the CAQ to be in a position where we have a Duplessis regime 50 years after Duplessis, 60 years after Duplessis. It's an unbelievable situation to have senior ministers saying it's illegitimate for you to seek the advice and a ruling by the courts. It's illegitimate for you to show up in a parliamentary committee. We're having a consultation. We want people's opinions, but if you disagree with the government, that is illegitimate, and we won't even talk to you. We won't listen to you. We've had two of those in 2 days. Legault has no sense of state, no sense of institutions, no sense of government, and that puny little approach by Legault is leaching into his cabinet. Jolin-Barrette and Roberge are two of the weaker members of that cabinet, but that's no excuse. He's supposed to be in charge. He should reel them in.
Tom, I want to play this out, all right? This challenge to Bill 21. So the EMSB says we're moving ahead. What has to happen? You're a lawyer. You've seen these cases before. The first question I asked of Jim Ennie earlier on was, there is still the possibility, right? It exists, that the Supreme Court could choose not to hear this case?
Yes, that is a legal possibility, but not a factual possibility, in the sense that this is such a huge honking issue. There's not the slightest chance that three members of that court are going to sit there one day and just say, oh, by the way, we've decided not to hear this case. Of course they're going to hear it. And by the way, Trudeau has always chickened out on this. He should have, years ago, instead of wasting everybody's time, he should have referred this case. It's called a reference case. There's only one person in Canada who can make a reference case to the Supreme Court, and that's the Prime Minister of Canada, because it's a cabinet decision. It's an order in council, and he could have easily done it. He was so afraid of Legault, he's let this thing fester, a little bit like, when he just let 24 Sussex Drive fall apart. When Trudeau doesn't know what to do, he just lets stuff fall apart. So he's let relationships under the Charter of Rights and the protection of those rights fall apart in the province of Quebec. And now he's saying that he's going to have no choice but to get involved. But we have no idea what he's going to say. I mean, whether or not he's going to defend the use of the notwithstanding clause, which is in the Constitution, that's the first part of that Court of Decision. But this core part has everything to do with control and management of school boards.
Let me ask you one other thing then, if we can play this again all the way through. Let's say it's going to go to the Supreme Court. There's a ruling. The ruling favors the EMSB's challenge. Can the Quebec government at that point simply choose to ignore that as well?
Well, that's a question that would normally never have to
Right.
be asked, because there's never been a case where a government has ignored a decision of the Supreme Court of Canada. Although we're pretty close to that right now with Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, because the Supreme Court just a couple of years ago ruled that the federal government had a right to bring in the famous carbon tax because it was part of its federal obligations to take care of future generations and its all of Canada approach. So the Supreme Court said Canada has jurisdiction. Scott Moe saying he was not going to send the money to Ottawa for the carbon tax. So it's the first time I've actually seen something that bold by a province. Could Legault try something like that? Right now, he's in a race to the bottom. He's looking for the lowest common denominator between himself and the Parti québécois. Parti québécois branding is going against individual rights. They boast about it. They're all about collective rights. Legault is trying to go down the same path, but his popularity is in the tank right now. So is he going to be able to try to boost his own fortunes by having a big fight with the feds? Jolin-Barrette, I don't think, would have done this solely on his own. He has to have checked it out a little bit. At least the big lines, the big theme around what he came out with today had to have been checked with the Premier's office. We're into uncharted territory here. We're into something that is the antithesis of democracy. It goes completely against the rule of law. And it's one thing for a lightweight like Jean-François Roberge in parliamentary committee to say, "Oh, you just said something I disagree with. I won't hear you. You have no right to express an opinion different from ours." That's just, pettiness and stupidity. But what we have here is the Attorney General of Quebec, the Justice Minister, saying you have no right to have access to the courts if you disagree with us. I mean, that is mind-boggling.